All right, so I've been traveling for almost 10 months at this point, and there's one thing that I continue to think about week after week after week. This is the biggest culture shock I've experienced since I left home. Now, when I say culture shock, I'm not just referring to any sort of cultural difference. Obviously, everywhere we've gone, there have been tons of things that are different from how they are back home, and that's great. That's why I travel. Half the joy of traveling is getting to experience how other parts of the world operate. But I can't really say I've been shocked by many of these differences. I've gone into each new place expecting various things to be different based on what I've heard or what I've read about that place. So when I get there, it's kind of like, yeah, this is basically what I thought it would be like. But there's one thing that keeps happening that's not at all what I was expecting, and it all has to do with liability waivers. Yes, probably the most boring topic you can imagine, but just hear me out because I find this pretty fascinating. So most of our travels so far have been around Southeast Asia and parts of Europe, but we actually started this journey in Canada. And as we've been traveling, I've been trying to maintain kind of a similar fitness routine to what I had back home. So I went to the nearest gym in our neighborhood in Montreal and asked to try it out. They told me how much the day pass costs. I paid them the money, and then they handed me a bunch of forms to fill out. Like, just to try the gym out once, I had to fill out this 3-page document where I had to write my name, my phone number, my address, things like that. But then also fill out this whole health questionnaire, basically ticking all these boxes saying that I'm healthy enough to exercise. Honestly, it didn't feel that different than going to a doctor's office. And then there was also the liability part where I had to say that I agree to all the rules and that I won't hold the gym responsible for anything stupid I do in their facility. Now, to a lot of people watching, I'm sure this sounds absurd, but this is not the culture shock. As someone who's spent the last 30 years in the United States, this is just standard procedure at every gym I've ever been to, including ones that are not open to the public. So I've lived in apartments and condo buildings that have a fitness center for residents, and also my last office building had a fitness center. And in every single case, the key fob that got me into all the common areas of the building never worked for the fitness center immediately. I always had to go through this separate process where I'd have to reach out to management, say I'd like to use the fitness center, and then they'd send me that liability waiver. And once I fill that out, then my key fob would be activated for the gym. And it's completely free. It's not like a money thing. It's literally all about that liability waiver. And it's not just gyms. Where I'm from, any sort of activity that involves any physical movement or any sort of risk of physical harm, even if it's incredibly minute, always comes with a liability waiver. I must have filled out hundreds of these things throughout my life. So fast forward to the next country we visited, which was Bulgaria. So a few days after landing, I did the same thing. I walked to the nearest gym in our neighborhood, asked if I could use it for a day. The guy told me how much the day pass was, so I handed him the money. And then I just kind of stood there awkwardly, waiting for all the paperwork to come. And then the guy gave me this look like, okay, you paid, now go do your thing. He didn't ask me to sign any forms, didn't even ask for my name, nothing. It was just pay the money, use the gym. Plain and simple. And I'm not kidding when I say that this was the most surprised I had been in our travels up until that point. I even made a video about that immediately after leaving the gym. Like, one of my first videos ever was about that experience of not having to fill out paperwork at the gym. So I just went to the gym here in Sofia and there was no liability waiver. But now I've been to lots of gyms in lots of different countries, and I've come to realize that the US and Canada are the weird ones here. Everywhere I've been since Bulgaria, it's been the same thing. Just walk in, pay the fee, use the facility. If I just want to use a gym for a day, I never have to go through a sign-up process. I never have to fill out any forms. It's amazing, especially since I'm constantly in a new city looking for a new gym. If I had to constantly fill out paperwork at each new gym, that would just kind of become a pain after a while. But that's just not a thing. Just before filming this video, I went to a gym here in Hoi An, Vietnam, and getting in was instantaneous. I walked in, I asked the guy how much a day pass costs. He said 30,000 dong, which is about $1 US. So I effectively handed the guy $1, and then immediately started working out. Getting through that process for the first time was literally quicker than buying a bottle of water at 7-Eleven or subscribing to my channel, which, by the way, I am so close to 1,000 subscribers. If you could just click that button, it would really mean the world to me and help me reach this goal. But anyway, it doesn't matter if I'm in Vietnam or Italy or anywhere in between. It's always just as simple. Aside from Canada, I've never had to sign any sort of paperwork to use a gym. Even when I sign up for a month-long membership, the extent of the documentation is just writing my name as like a record that I've paid. Now, I'm certainly not an expert in this topic, so I'm not gonna dive deep into why things are this way. But what I will say is that I'm slowly beginning to realize how much Americans love to sue each other. People sue each other and they sue businesses all the time for anything that goes wrong. And until I started traveling long term, I thought this was just the way the world worked. That as a business, you could get sued at any moment. So you need as many legal protections from your customers as possible in the form of waivers and other sort of paperwork. I never even considered that maybe this isn't as much of a thing in other parts of the world. And that actually got me thinking about this guardrail culture in general. That's not a metaphor. I'm talking about literal guardrails now. So I remember being on vacation with Lexi in Northern Ireland a few years before we started this long-term travel journey. And we went up to the Giant's Causeway, which is a beautiful coastal area with lots of cliffs and amazing viewpoints. And all we could talk about there was how baffled we were by the lack of guardrails. Like, if you were an idiot and got really close to the edge to get a selfie or something, you could just fall off the edge of the cliff and die. Like, there's nothing stopping you. And this wasn't a complaint. Like, the area did feel very safe and well maintained, but we were just speculating how if that exact cliff was in the US, there would be like 20 signs educating you about the dangers of falling off a cliff. There would be all sorts of guardrails and fences and all these safety precautions basically preventing you from being an idiot. And that would kind of ruin the experience. Like, it was amazing to be able to see these cliffs in their natural glory and be able to go out as far as we felt comfortable without there being a whole bunch of obstructions everywhere. And now that I've been outside the US for so long, I'm beginning to appreciate this kind of thing so much more. Here's the best visual I can give you. So there's this amazing canyon in northern Thailand called Pai Canyon, where I saw the best sunset I've ever seen in my life. And part of what makes this place so amazing is this super narrow stretch of cliff that's barely wide enough to walk across. It looks absolutely stunning, and having guardrails there would totally ruin it. Now, tons of people do walk across this thing, and I'm sure it's perfectly safe as long as you're not this guy. Michael, if you're watching this, I'm so glad you're still alive. But still, I know that I happen to be very uncoordinated, and there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that I could accidentally stumble off that cliff. So I decided to take responsibility for my own safety and decided not to walk across it. And the general sense I've gotten is that in many countries, people take responsibility for their own safety. People take calculated risks, and if they get injured, they take responsibility for miscalculating that risk. Whereas in the US, when someone gets injured, the first question is often, who can I sue? And if you don't believe me, just drive through any highway in Northwest Indiana and you will see literally hundreds of billboards for injury attorneys. But anyway, back to the gym thing. It's such a breath of fresh air to be able to simplify what used to be pages of documents into just a simple transaction, right? You have a thing. I would like to use that thing for a bit. Here's some money. Now we're good. When the whole system isn't based around fear of getting sued by your customers, everything can be so much simpler for everyone involved. And as a long-term traveler, it's things like this that continue to delight me. I called this a culture shock, and it is a shock in the sense that it really surprised me. But it's really more of a culture delight. Every time I walk into a gym and there's not a single bit of paperwork to fill out, I don't know, it brings me so much joy. And it's yet another reason why I love getting out of the country I grew up in and seeing how people in other parts of the world live their lives.